Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing okay. Today we're going to carry on with the next part of the current little series that we're doing on men and women of the Old Testament. We just heard last week of the faith of Sarah as she trusted in the promises of God, and she eventually conceived a baby, a promised miracle child. And today we're going to look a bit more at that promised child, and the child is called Isaac. A little context comes from what we see in Genesis 12, where God makes a promise to Abraham, Isaac's father, that through him and his family, all the nations will find God's blessing. And this is the start of God's rescue plan for the whole of fallen and sinful humanity. But as you might remember from what we heard last week, Abraham and Sarah were both really old, and Sarah was barren. Years went by and still no child came. So Sarah, fearful that she wouldn't have a child, gave her servant Hagar to Abraham. And Abraham and Hagar conceived a child who was called Ishmael. But God reminds Abraham again in Genesis 17 of his promise that a child will be born from Sarah, and eventually Isaac is born. Isaac was the promised and waited for son of Abraham and Sarah. The son of promise from God was born, a miracle son and the start of God's rescue plan for humanity. And then as Isaac grows, we see in Genesis 22, as God tests Abraham's faith, he commands Abraham to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. And just as Abraham lifts up the knife to sacrifice Isaac, God sees Abraham's faith and he provides a sacrificial lamb in Isaac's place. Then Isaac, the son of the promise, has children who also have children, all part of this rescue plan, this rescue line from Abraham, until we get to Jesus, where we see God's rescue plan become a reality. Isaac was the son of Abraham, was the promised son for Abraham, but he was not the son the whole of humanity needed. That was Jesus. Isaac's mentioned a number of times in the New Testament. In Galatians 4, Paul mentions the two sons of Abraham. One son, Ishmael, born from a slave, Hagar, born of the flesh, not born of the promise. And then the other son, Isaac, born of a free woman, Sarah, born through the promise of God. Isaac was a miracle baby and the beginning of the great nation and the great blessing promised to Abraham. And as we know, from the line of Isaac was Jesus, the promised Messiah, the pinnacle of that rescue plan of God. As he hangs on a tree, he's the sacrificial lamb. You might think today that that's completely irrelevant for me and for you watching this. We're not in the line of Isaac, we're not from that line of Abraham. But Paul says to Christians that, like Isaac, we're children of promise. In Romans 8 and 9, we're told that although we're maybe not from the line and offspring of Abraham, we're adopted into the family of God, and we're children of the promise. And that means that we're counted as offspring. That means that we can live and walk in freedom and joy as heirs with Christ, receiving a great inheritance. It means that we don't have to earn God's favour or be slaves to the law, like what Paul was saying to the Galatian church. I really encourage you to go and read all the things that we inherit as Christians, as adopted sons and daughters and heirs with Christ. It'll fill your heart with joy. It should fill your heart with joy, because there's absolutely nothing that we can do to earn this. There's nothing that we have done. There's nothing that we can do to earn this. It's totally undeserved. It's the greatest gift that you or I could ever receive. And it's completely free. This means that today that we can rest and find complete and everlasting joy in the forgiving and adoptive love of our amazing Father who keeps his promises. Being counted as a child of God is something that is offered to me and to you because of that rescue plan that God had. The rescue plan of Jesus and what he did on the cross for me and for you. Isaac was a child of promise. Can you say that with Isaac, you're a child of promise? Can you say that you're an adopted child of God? If so, what is your response going to be to this every day?